now we're going to turn to our GMA cover story. Elliot Page opening up about his first interview since coming out as a transgender man in December. The Academy Award nominated actor and LGBTQ activist revealing what led to the decision and life since the announcement.
Gender theory is a cancer in our society. What was once a small fringe ideology has metastasized into a destructive force, causing the decay of Western culture as we know it.
Caitlyn Jenner dazzles as she accepts the Woman of the Year award from Glamour magazine.
We're seeing this ideology thrust onto our youth. It's literally pervasive. It's in all aspects in every institution of our culture. You can look at our entertainment.
Everyone, there's something I need to tell you. The princess who came to your ball tonight was me. I'm Gonzarella.
You can look in sports.
First time ever, a transgender athlete will compete. Here's Jake Crawford with the story.
Her name is Laurel Hubbard. Born a man, she has since transitioned to a female.
You can even look in our schools.
Patton County teacher on administrative leave tonight after saying that he would not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa.
After seeing a September 9th school board meeting in Texas on pornography in the schools, I decided to check the titles at my child's school, Fairfax High School. The books were available, and we checked them out.
And even at the highest levels of our federal government.
Levine will be the first openly transgender four-star officer. She previously served, of course, as Philadelphia's Secretary of Health.
Democratic Virginia delegate Elizabeth Guzman is a social worker, and she's planning on reintroducing a bill in Richmond that she says would help protect LGBTQ children from their parents and guardians who may not be affirming of their child's sexual orientation and gender identity.
This is how we're going to push back.
Her bill would expand the state's definition of child abuse and neglect to include parents who do not affirm their child's gender identity or sexual orientation.
To parents of transgender children, affirming your child's identity is one of the most powerful things you can do to keep them safe and healthy.
How did such a radical ideology become so mainstream in our society? Gender ideology, as we know it, can be traced back to one man, a doctor by the name of John Money. He was a New Zealand psychologist and author who founded the Gender Identity Clinic at Johns Hopkins University. This was the first clinic in the U.S. to perform sex reassignment surgeries on adults as well as infants. Money is famous for coining the terms such as sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender roles. John posited that one's gender identity, that's how someone perceives their own sexuality, could differ from their biological sex. He also believed that gender roles were not the result of biology but the influence of society on that individual. For example, girls like dolls and boys like trucks. He believes that this was caused by society thrusting these ideas onto children rather than they organically coming to that conclusion on their own. John was able to get the chance to put his theory to the test in the 1960s after the mother of twin boys were referred to him after a botched circumcision that emasculated one of the boys. Money told the mother that gender was the result of outside influences and had nothing to do with biology, and he suggested that they raise the boy as a girl. After this, the child underwent a sex reassignment surgery and was named Brenda. Over the course of his childhood, Brenda and his brother were studied by Money. He would often make them pose nude and even touch each other in their private areas and even pose them in sexual positions so that he could then take pictures of them. Money went on to publish his research and called it a success. He believed that they successfully took a child that was born biologically male and was able to transition them into a female without any issues. However, Brenda was never able to transition into being a female because he was not. By the time that Brenda was a teenager, he knew that something was wrong with him, and finally his mother told him the truth. He told him that he was born a male and that they had transitioned him into a female. He then changed his name to David, and by the time he was a young adult, he had already transitioned into becoming a male and speaking against this ideology. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The damage had already been done, and eventually David would end up taking his own life, and later on his brother would end up doing the same. And that's because this destructive ideology that was thrust upon these two young boys when they couldn't help it, when they couldn't defend themselves, when they couldn't consent, it was pushed onto them, and that resulted in their destruction and their demise. We're told the most loving thing someone can do for somebody with gender dysphoria is to affirm their gender identity. However, if we look at the facts, that's simply not the truth. First off, if you do not intervene in any way, most children with gender dysphoria will grow out of it if they aren't medically or socially transitioned. In fact, between 65 and 90%, depending on what data you look at, will grow out of their gender dysphoria if no intervention is made. So not only will over half, but the biggest majority of these kids will grow out of it if they are not transitioned. But if you transition these kids socially and medically, almost all of them stay in this new gender identity where they would have grown out of it, where they would have been able to go and live a normal, productive life. Now they have been indoctrinated into this, and many of them have underwent medical procedures that there is no coming back from. And once they get into this ideology, once they begin to transition socially and medically, they're on the path to setting themselves up for serious medical risks and even mental health risks. In fact, most trans individuals are at an increased risk for anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders, as well as drug and alcohol abuse. And a lot of people will say, well, this is because they're not affirmed, or because people aren't affirming their gender and they're undergoing all this discrimination, which might be true to a certain extent. But if you will look in our society, these people are put on a pedestal. They are affirmed. They're affirmed whether it's in their schools, whether it's from these big institutions, whether it's from the government. You look all around you, even look in just our media, look at the television shows. Everywhere you look, you see trans ideology being pushed and furthered along. These people aren't being oppressed and aren't being affirmed. Everyone is affirming them, and if you do not affirm them, you will be attacked. So it's not that they're not being affirmed, it's because these people have serious mental health issues that aren't being treated. They're being ignored, and because these medical issues and mental health issues are being ignored, these people have one of the highest suicide rates among any population in the U.S. The suicide rate among trans individuals is 19 times higher than the average American. So compared to the average person, a trans individual suicide rate is 19 times higher. In fact, it really doesn't change before and after the transition. Some people think that if they were to transition, that it would help them and they would be at a more stable place, but there's really not much of a difference. It's around 40%. Whether before or after transition. So transitioning medically really doesn't help the trans individual to not be a suicide risk, and that's because they have other mental health issues that aren't being treated. And finally, if you affirm this, all it's going to do is encourage other people to go down this path. In fact, you can see that the more kids that have friends who are in the LGBTQ community, the more likely they are to become a member of the LGBT community. So as you can see, affirming this is the opposite of what we should be doing. By affirming this, you are pushing these kids, or even in some cases adults, down a path that is leading to their destruction. They do not need to be affirmed in their delusions. They need help. What they need isn't to affirm their identity. What they need is for the truth to be affirmed. The Bible makes it clear that there is a sexual binary. Genesis chapter 1 verses 27 and 28 says, God made man in His own image, male and female, He created them. Science agrees with this. Not just humans, but all mammalian species, there exists a sexual binary. Why? For the purpose of procreation. Even there in verse 28 of Genesis chapter 1, the first command that God gives man is to be fruitful and multiply. Not only that, but there exists this binary between men and women because they were created differently to serve different roles. If you go over to Genesis chapter number 2, we see that women were made to be a helpmate, to complement the man and to aid him, while the man is to serve as the head of the woman, to be the provider, the protector, and the leader. And to reject these roles that were not given to us by society or even by biology, but by God Himself, is detestable in His eyes, according to Deuteronomy 22 verse number 5. This is ultimately one of the greatest issues with gender ideology. It's not that it's just rejecting reality or a perverse sexual desire, but it's a rejection of the duty and a rejection of the purpose that God has for your life. By refusing to live up to the duty that God has called you to, you are depriving of society of the role you were meant to fulfill. We see that kids are growing up nowadays without a mom. We're seeing kids grow up without a dad. We're seeing parents grow up without a son or without a daughter. We're seeing community missing the leaders that they were meant to have or the caretakers they were meant to have, because we see men and women leaving the role that they were created for and now trying to enter into one that they weren't meant for. Gender ideology doesn't just harm the individual that is caught up in it, but it harms everyone around them. We need to stop affirming the lies that are destroying lives, and we need to start affirming the truth. The truth is by far more loving than a lie. This lie is sending people down a path that is going to lead them to their destruction. It's either going to lead them to more mental health issues, lead them to alcoholism or drug abuse. It's going to lead them to anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts and ideations, and ultimately their spiritual destruction. We don't need to affirm these lies. We need to affirm the truth. The truth is by far more loving. People think that you need to affirm this lie to help them, to make them feel better about themselves. But think about what you're doing. You're telling this person that they have something wrong with them and they have to permanently alter their body to fix it. We're telling young girls, we're telling teenage girls that they truly are a boy, and if they want to fix this problem, they have to have their breasts chopped off and have a penis sewn to their vagina so that they can truly be who they're meant to be. That doesn't sound loving to me. It sounds grotesque. It sounds barbaric. It sounds awful. Because we're telling these people that there is something wrong with them and that they have to physically alter themselves to fix it. Think about this. Look at this illustration. What if you had a child come to you and say that there was a monster under their bed? Would it be loving of you to tell them, yes, there is a monster under your bed and you need to hide from it or it's going to get you? No parent would do that. No parent would say that. You know that deep down that monster is just a delusion, that it's not really there, it's just the child's imagination. You would never affirm that, because all you're going to do is further scar that child and make them believe something that's not true. What you're going to do is not affirm their delusion, you're going to affirm the truth. You're going to tell that child that there's nothing to be afraid of because that monster does not exist. There is no monster under your bed. There is no monster that's waiting there hiding to get you. That this isn't the truth. That the truth is that there is nothing under your bed. You have nothing to be afraid of, nothing to worry about. See, to affirm the lie is harming, and to affirm the truth is liberating. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to be telling people the truth. We need to be affirming the truth. Jesus says in John chapter number 8 that if you abide in my teachings, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. If we truly want to liberate these people, if we truly want to help these trans individuals, it's not going to be affirming the lies that they're being told by society or the lies that they're being told by their own mind, but it's affirming the truth that they are created in the image of God, that they are created with a purpose, that God has a plan for their life, and even if they don't see it right now, that by affirming this truth, you are setting them down a path toward liberation rather than toward destruction.